Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful Tuesday. I hope wherever you are, things are working out for you. I hope wherever you are, whatever troubles and things that trouble your mind or get you down, I hope they are moving in the right direction and you're able to have a brighter perspective. I thank everybody in advance for coming on this show. I was doing, you do your research when you do shows. I know it's funny. Preach, you do research for the SOS? Yes, I do. Because I feel like it's incumbent that when I speak to you, I speak from a point where I'm informed, more so than just having hypothesis, more so than having, forecasting. It's beginning to try and look at the trajectory of what society is and trying to figure out where we're going as a country, as a minority contingent, as a Muslim contingent, and it really startled me as I began to go through these things to begin to understand a little bit more that we are a country in peril, and as a country that frames itself as being, the leaders of the free world, or at least majority players, that our politics has become a little bit of a misnomer. We've been flooded a lot with, the insurrection. Many of you remember the show that I did 2 days before the insurrection. It smells like a coup to me. And that's not really something where I really had to do a whole lot of digging. More so, it's just being able to read tea leaves. Looking at things and saying, hey, wait a minute, this does not specifically look right. You can look at third world countries and say, wait a minute, that's what they're doing here. This is what's going on. That's what they're doing there. This is what's going on here. And I really spent a part of the day just trying to decompress because we're entering a very, very tenuous period right now in regards to voting. Today's topic is the valuation of the vote, the Voting Rights Act. And why I said it's a valuation, because we're getting ready to go into a period where two cases are going to be in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and they could realistically frame the death for the rest of the Voting Rights Act, which is hanging on by a string right now. It's literally hanging on by a string right now. So for all of the things we might have said about Trump and the GOP and Trump supporters, and a very, very effective case has been made to pack the courts with conservative judges who will do a hatchet job on voting rights. So before I get into that, let me thank anybody that's coming on the show for the first time. I'm the host of the SOS. My name is Preacher Moss. I humbly welcome you. Some simple rules when you come on our show. While I'm the host, this is a platform and you are duly welcome to this platform. A part of being on a platform, we also ask, and this is the team, the ShOUT Show family, ShOUT Show soldiers. We simply ask that, you be a part of the show. Don't be shy. You're amongst family. Get in the comment section. Give your shout-outs. Let us know what you're thinking. We're not here to judge anybody. We're here to just talk about ideas, talk about issues. When I say this is a family show, this is a family show. That's what I mean. All right? So I also want to start the top of the show out by saying, number one, shout out to Tiger Woods, who was involved in a pretty bad car accident from what I saw, a rollover incident. They're saying he has multiple leg injuries, some compound fractures. Well wishes from all of us out to Tiger Woods. We hope that situation amends itself. And if you're in, like I said, and if you're new to the show, if you don't mind, we need subscribers. Hit the subscribe button, notification button. If you like the show, hit the like button. But I'm going to show you how the show normally goes. I start out right here. We'll give a shout out to Sister Ree. She's under the weather. We're going to send out those du'as to you right now. Sister Ree, we hope that Allah increase your health, your sustenance, and give you shifa. You need that. You do a lot for a lot of people. I need you to do for yourself in the means of eating well and getting yourself some good proper rest and getting some sleep and things of those nature. Okay? But I'll call you after the show, make sure that you're all right. Everybody's going to give you well wishes on this show, and I will post them. Sister Santiago, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Oh boy, twisted ankle fracture. Whew. I am always a person that lives in fear of lower limb injuries, Sister Santiago. So we wish you the best. I will try to get a text out to you. Hope you're feeling better. Um, the ice hopefully goes away soon, but that accident, I wish you the best with that. And take it easy. Take it easy. Let us know if you need anything. Okay. Sister Satana Whitfield, our consultant producer on the show here, the Shout Out Show. Always in the house. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Appreciate you. Again, good conversation earlier today. Sister Jasmine's Fruits, all the way from the UK. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sister, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate you, and we hope that we justify you staying up late. You and Sister Rabina Chaudhry, so we definitely appreciate you. All right, and I got my little brother here, Johnny L. Thomas. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You know what it is to get such a hearty salams from my brother? Y'all don't even know. Y'all probably think my brother is Muslim, but I'm gonna check his papers. I think he's an undercover Muslim, man. He's always made me feel good about my deen and just being around me and make sure I stay on things like fasting and just trying to be a better person. So JT, I appreciate you for coming on the show. Thanks again, brother. Sister Aika, all the way from Indonesia. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much. And give a shout out to our Indonesia Depak family. And let them know that the shout out family, all of us, all the people who come on the show, we send peace and blessings to Jakarta, peace and blessings to Indonesia, and hope that all of you are having a blessed day. Okay. Let me talk about this topic because it involves a little bit of forensic work. As my mother used to say, you got to do a little forensic work. You got to dig in the crates a little bit. The whole idea of voter suppression really took hold before the Obama situation. Before Obama was a legitimate candidate, they had been trying to pare down the Voting Rights Act prior to that point. But it comes to a big case in 2013 with, at the time, Attorney General Eric Holder. He was involved in the case. It was called Shelby County versus Holder. And what they were trying to do in this case, brothers and sisters, is to repeal a protection for particularly minority voters. They just can't say black anymore, but minority voters, and protecting them against states who would change voting laws prior to elections. Let me give you a case in point. The word is called pre-clearance. And there's been a massive war going on about the validity of pre-clearance. Now, let me explain this as a background. The Voting Rights Act, all the way up until the Reagan years, was something that was continually expanded because the protections had to be expanded beyond African Americans. We can talk about that later. But the voting rights protections had to be expanded beyond African Americans, and what that means is it had to be expanded for non-blacks. It had to be expanded for disabilities. It had to be expanded and have a very much robust representation in terms of people's ability to vote. Summarily, it expanded. And like I said, even through the Reagan years, it expanded. But then you had a fundamental shift. That fundamental shift represents two things that they don't really talk about. Number one is the breadth and the hold of the Republican Party is a party that's relatively small. What they have is a big microphone. When I say that the GOP is not as big as you think it is, that boogeyman is not as big as you think it is. You could turn on the lights and you'll realize that what you thought was 8 feet tall is maybe about 4 feet tall or 5 feet tall. But the general characteristics is knowing that they're not that big, you now have to resort to something to make sure that you maintain power. And one of the ways you maintain power is being able to be successful and masterful with affecting turnout at the polls. Because you no longer can deny people to vote, it now moves to the space whereby people decide to affect your ability to cast your vote. That was one thing. And once it couldn't affect your ability to cast your vote, and then began the ability to have your vote counted. Is it valid? Now, we all saw what happened in 2001. Let me give a shout out. Altaf, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh, brother. I'm glad you're back, man. I hope you're doing well. Big up in Toronto. Hope it's not too cold. There you go. Let me put this out here for Sister Santiago. It said, feel better from Sister Sultana. Sister Sultana says, Reed, feel better. Look at this. Families. Sister Santiago says, Reed, feel better. See, that's family. But what happened in this 2013 case, which Holder lost, I think it was 5-4. What happened in this space, brothers and sisters, is you now have a situation / scenario whereby people can essentially decide they couldn't get rid of preclearance. However, it adapted the formula. And preclearance was seen as restrictive because it's based on data that was over 40 years old. Pump your brakes on that. They're saying that racism affecting voting or the data around it is 40 years old. It totally makes you think that only racism is 40 years old or 50 years old or somehow, some way, no longer has a bearing because that's the way they presented it. They said that preclearance wasn't necessary per se because it had done such a good job at eliminating racism and discrimination at the polls. That's a laugher. All of us know that. The thing that's coming up now, brothers and sisters, and when I talk about Reagan expanding the Voting Rights Act, there was a person who dissented against Reagan who was also Republican. He's Chief Justice John Roberts, who's on the Supreme Court today. Now, why is this important? There's a number of reasons why it's important, but I'm going to give you some of the larger reasons. As soon as this election was over for 2020, there was a mass flurry of legislation and bills being introduced to do what? Restrict voting. Not just restrict voting in terms of the ability to vote, restrict voting in terms of the places you could vote, restrict voting in terms of when you could vote, restrict voting in terms of who could control your vote or hold your vote, you'll mail your vote in. So this whole thing is a backlash, if you will. It's a backlash due to the fact that for so many years, particularly up to the last, let's say, 10, 15 years, that you didn't have, up to that point in some regards, a full-on educated electorate about voting rights. And that group I'm talking about is African Americans. Because going back going back many years, it's been a well-known fact that black voter turnout can turn elections. And so what you saw in Georgia, and so what you saw in places like Georgia and things like that, it scared people because it was the fruition and the idea of what you've been doing to us, we can now do it to you, but with much greater emphasis and much greater intensity, because now we could put you in a situation where you can't even vote to vote. You can't even vote the things that allow you to control our vote. Big shout out to Stacey Abrams. But what you have now is this proliferation. The two cases that are coming up now are in Arizona, and they will be presented in front of the Supreme Court. This could be the death blow, brothers and sisters. This could legitimately be the death blow to the Voting Rights Act in terms of protecting our vote. You see, when they did the preclearance thing, all the data is there. When they did away with preclearance as a formula to adjust. You know, they did away with the formula, but they didn't require state legislatures to come up with a formula that would correct the way preclearance did. No. All the data suggests polling places, thousands of polling places were closed. The ability to go vote, they cut off the amount of days you could vote. No souls to the polls. no absentee ballots, no mail-in ballots. They're literally in the state of Texas trying to take COVID-19 off as an excuse for not voting in person. Now, does it sound criminal to you? It sounds insidious and it sounds criminal to me, but I'm going to tell you why. People have capitalized on the fact that we like diversions. We engage diversions. The more emotional it is, the more apt we are to follow the diversion. And while we celebrate a victory of Georgia turning blue by slim, it wasn't a huge majority, you realize now that there's a blueprint. And while we sit and rest on our laurels, you now have people that are introducing massive amounts of legislation in parts of Georgia, in parts of Wisconsin, in parts of Texas, in parts of Florida, in parts of Arizona, in parts of all these other places, to seriously limit the ability and the functionality of votes for minorities. You know, this has been a debated point for a lot, and we may debate it here. Martin Luther King's greatest achievement, let's say his greatest magic trick, if you will, was to lead people emotionally to the polls. Because he knew leading people emotionally to the polls allowed people to focus more on opportunities, to look at the vestiges of power. I want to vote. I want to be a person that creates laws. It's very clear. Before pre-clearance happened, you had a lot more black congresspeople. There was a higher congressional representation of African Americans. The Congressional Black Caucus was a lot bigger. And the ability, brothers and sisters, to understand that the vote is one thing, but the ability to make laws is another thing. You see, we have a fascination in some regards where we look at the president, the executive branch, we look at the legislative branch, but we really don't have a relationship. I'm talking a full-on intellectual, emotional intelligence with the judicial system, the judicial branch. It's like a boogeyman's house. It's like a haunted house for us. I can remember Thurgood Marshall when he retired, and they asked him why he was retiring. He said, "I'm old." And he was old. And he was the guy that fought on our behalf to make sure that the law was interpreted correctly. There's a 6-3 advantage for conservatives on the bench, on the Supreme Court bench. I know, I shouldn't say I know, but I have a strong feeling that Clarence Thomas is going to be a vote to totally dismantle the Voting Rights Act. How do I know? I'm not going to call him Uncle Tom, but he's in a place now where he can do Uncle Tomish things. And he's never been a lover of black life or black lifestyle. Not since he got on the bench. And there's a reason for that, because there's a disparity of us there. There's an old saying, how do you keep a Jew out of the country club? You hire one Jew and he keeps the other out. Well, Clarence Thomas does that, but it's not that he's keeping another black justice out. He's keeping our policies out. He's keeping our concerns. He's keeping our sensibilities out of that legal space whereby all these other people don't have to think about it. The closest you have to African-American sensitivity, or people might understand it, is Sonia Sotomayor. And that's where we are. But as we begin to move, you say, what does this look like? What does this look like? The two cases that are coming up in Arizona touch on 2 points. One is a move or a ruling on whether if somebody votes in the wrong jurisdiction, can you just outright void their vote? Not just take it off the count where a person can still vote, but we're going to totally discount their vote, which to me is disenfranchisement of a voter. That's number one. Then number two, the argument in another case in Arizona is who has the ability, or can you eliminate third parties who collect votes for other people? Because there's some people who can't get out. They have their votes, they have their ballots, but they can't get out. They're now trying to eliminate that. And just between those two things, brothers and sisters, is an election. One of the greatest things that I've ever seen in my mind, not in my history, I'm not even talking about Barack Obama as being the first black president, no. I'm talking about the coalescence of a multi-democratic national front that recognizes the needs of blacks, Latinos, the poor, Native Americans as a collective body and goes to the polls. That has an agenda, not necessarily a political action committee, but they have an agenda that scares the foundational racism and institutional injustice that this country is built on. Just the idea of people choosing that pre-clearance has done a great job. None of those people are African Americans. None of those people are Latinos. They are white conservatives. And I say white conservatives not as an indicative of white people. I say white conservatives indicative of people who do not deal with black people, who do not deal with Native Americans or Latinos. There's spaces, those worlds don't intersect. We all know rich people hang with rich people. Rich people don't hang out with poor people. Poor people hang out with poor people. Poor people don't hang out with rich people. Poor people wind up getting what? Exploited by rich people, but we don't hang out with them. We see the vestiges of capitalism and we cling on to it because that's the only thing we think gives us opportunity. It's the same thing as the vote now. Building upon clarity on this is the idea that you now have a scared electorate that had just lost, a scared electorate that did everything they could to produce low voter turnout, and they still lost. The largest ever voter turnout supplanted by an even bigger, larger turnout. And herein lies the rub. We can't be people who are reactive. Let me say it again. We can't be people who are reactive. My mentor, Harry Weber, said something years ago about African Americans. He said, black people are great at making moves, horrible at making decisions. Great at making moves, horrible at making decisions. And I said, yeah, but then thought about it. You know, a decision is indicative that you have all the information, that you have access to large amounts of information. So you do make a decision. And when you don't have that decision, all that data, if you will, you make moves. You move within spaces where your data is applicable. It's not laid out. If you have information that gets you from point A to point B, duly, you're going to do moves that take you from point A to point B. If the process is point A to point J, but you only got point A to point B, you know what's going to happen. If the decision is this way, but you only have this amount of information, all of a sudden, it begins to make sense. Because it becomes a situation, they're talking about it now, about misinformation, disinformation, and all the variables that have led to these smoke screens and stuff like that, which inevitably inevitably will make sure that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And not just in terms of finances. I'm talking about in terms of representation. I'm talking about in terms of opportunity. And here we are. Something that is so American, there's no one yelling foul except the people who are affected the most. There's no one yelling foul going, that's a violation of the Constitution. That's a violation of America right there. Just the idea that to win, I have to make sure that your people don't come out. Years ago, I was in a comedy contest. Yep, I used to do comedy contests. It's a place called the Funny Bone on the east side of Milwaukee. East side of Milwaukee. And there I was to do my little comedy. Then I was a young guy, brothers and sisters. I was a young guy, and it was supposed to be amateurs. Let me say it again. It was supposed to be amateur comedians. And I worked my tail off, and I worked my material, and I was really happy about who I was and what I was doing, and I was confident. And I went up, and I'm not bragging, but I put in the work, and I won that competition. Everyone in the room knew I won the competition. The prize was $100. But before, they said, does anybody else want to go up? Now here I am looking at I knew all the comedians in Milwaukee. A bunch of the comedians in Chicago. I knew them. So picture this. I'm waiting because I know I did the best job. I have acquiescence from all my friends that I did the best job. I'm going to get that $100. The owner said, wait a minute, we have one more act. And we all looked around like, who the hell is this act? And there was a comedian named Rocky LaPorte. Rocky LaPorte had been on Showtime and things like that. He was a seasoned comedian. And he went up and he destroyed the room. I don't have a problem against Rocky LaPorte. I saw him later on in life and we talked about this. I had no problem with Rocky LaPorte. My problem was it was an amateur competition. And I said, Rocky, I always want to know, did you know we were amateurs? He said, no, the owner just told me to go up and do 15 minutes. Now, the competition said you can only do 5. He did 15 minutes. And they asked the crowd, hey, was he funny? Yeah. And so what happened? I didn't get the $100. The owner changed the rules to make sure I didn't get the $100. But the way he did it was he made everyone else understand I could change the rules. And so it stands with this pre-clearance, brothers and sisters. It is the protection that was there to change the rules is now gone. And we now have this proliferation of these bills that will consistently and constantly attack voting rights. Therefore, the valuation of the vote, as listed on the banner, is almost nil. Because you now allow people to determine the value of a vote, where it's collected, when it's turned in, who verified it, who verified the signature, did you have the right ID? You know, back in the day, they used to have what they call, poll tests, voting tests. My favorite question came from a senator from Indiana from way back when, who marveled at the fact that he could disparage and discourage black voters by asking them the question, how many bubbles are there in a bar of soap? And they would get frustrated and leave. But that's because they didn't have all the data. Because if I were to go to vote and they say, how many bubbles are there in a bar of soap? I say, before I answer that question, am I taking a shower or am I taking a bath? Is the soap scented or is it regular? How long will I get to be in the bath with the soap? I can tell you how much bubbles I'm going to have. And therefore, you begin to give them information based off of data that they could conjecture, but now I can give it to you as fact. So as I begin to wrap up, brothers and sisters, I think it's really, really important that for the next 4 years, as we move into 2024. And you begin to see that people are already forming these ideas. So and so wants to be a kingmaker for the Republican Party. So and so wants to be a candidate. You know, the Republican Party literally wants us to forget that Trump was president for the last 4 years. You see that there's this dissociative amnesia whereby what you see, they can't verify. And what they can't verify means it didn't happen. The goal of these things is in 4 years, we'll get so frustrated by all the things we see and we'll feel powerless. We'll feel helpless for a system that's not there for us in the first place. And now we see the system harming us yet again. You literally have people use the word voter suppression as a strategy, which means that you can't be winning on your platforms or your planks, your political planks, because it regards you cheating, suckering the people to not to come out. Thanks, Facebook. Thanks, Russia. To create disharmony and dissatisfaction to the point where what? People don't want to be involved in a negative process. Ironically, the people who push that turn around and go, the whole thing's rigged. Keep your eye on the Supreme Court. They are the most dangerous body to African Americans, to Native Americans, to Latino, to the poor, to the downtrodden, and they're about to do it again. Don't blink. Most people say, don't blink, you might miss it. No, don't blink, because your eyes might not open again. Real talk. So before I get out of here, let me give a quick shout out for our sponsor. I want you guys to check out BeFinanciallyIndependent.com. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com, or you can call the number at 1-800-679-3175. Again, that's BeFinanciallyIndependent.com, or you can call the number 1-800-679-3175. And I'm going to say this as well. You know, there's been some things going on in terms of finance. You know, we're going to try and get some people on here to talk about the validity of cryptocurrency. That's huge right now. But there's something else we also need to be talking about, which is, you know, how these things are traded, but also how you can develop currency. And you know, the blockchain thing is really fascinating because blockchain is the thing that fuels cryptocurrency. And now you have a scenario whereby, you know, they're going about to have the first auction using blockchain, which is huge. Because when you talk about, you know, not having to transact in terms of physical money, it's the next step. So I want everybody to make sure that you take a look at that. All right, Reed, you got some more well wishes. So I hope I didn't depress people with the vote. Or I hope I didn't. But I thought it was really, really important to talk about it because this Voting Rights Act is coming up very soon. And I think we need to be aware of it. I'm sounding the bells early. I'm pulling the goalie. I'm getting my megaphone out because, you know, as they say in the old school, about the table. If you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. I don't want us to be on the menu. So I want to thank everybody. I appreciate you. Feel better. I'll check on you. And we all have you in prayer. God bless, and we will see you soon. Oh, there's Mom. Assalamu alaikum, Mama Son. Appreciate you. So, everybody, just think about what we talked about today. And don't just think about it. Talk about it with somebody else. You know, the great example is Stacey Abrams down in Georgia. Stacey Abrams down in Georgia, she got robbed out of being the governor of Georgia. Hear me what I'm saying? She got robbed. And the person who was supposed to be looking over the vote and ensuring fairness was basically the man that she was running against. And nobody said, hey, there's a conflict of interest. People just shrugged their shoulders and go, that's the way it is. Until there's a law to change it, that's the way it is. So we're not talking about moral correctness, ethical correctness, fairness, justice. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people who cling to vestiges of power through corruption only by virtue of the fact that the law supports them doing it. So, not to be on a soapbox, but I'm like, we really need to step our game up. I personally need to step my game up. I'm going to go back and read the case. It's a very long case of Shelby County versus Holder, Eric Holder, who was the Attorney General at the time under Barack Obama, because the underpinnings of that decision have led us to where we are now. We have very, very thin margin. If you want to really, really understand Trump and his cronies and why they were so upset, the balance of power by virtue of the fact of how they had affected minority voting had framed it whereby it was going to fail, had framed it whereby the only way you could win, or Biden could win, is that they had to have an incredible amount of turnout, which they did. They thought they were going to win because the fix was in. The fix was in. And they thought they could go around to all of these places in the absence of preclearance and change the law. Brothers and sisters, I say it from the bottom of my heart. You can either at the table or you're on the menu. Let's stop being reactive. That's my show today, everybody. Have a blessed day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. That's a shout-out show. Inshallah, I will see you tomorrow. Take care now.
Hey everybody, this is your brother Preacher Moss. Listen, I hope that you enjoyed your shout out show experience. We'll be back with the next show, the next shout out show. A simple ask before you go, please help your brother out. Click that subscribe button, click that notify button, and I'll see you again on this side of the microphone. You probably wonder what that smell is. That's me. I smell good. And the reason I smell good is because I use oils from Tarif Attar. So I'm not saying you can't smell good. I'm not even saying you stink. I'm saying you have the opportunity to smell exquisite. Check out tarifattar.com for some of the best oils and scents in town.